Good afternoon. Did you have a good lunch? Because I know it's always difficult to come back after lunch. So please do not nap and try to be engaged. So we're here to talk about performance, and I am joined with the OPSys Group, co-founder and CEO. Just to start off with, can you guys tell us what the OPSys Group is about? And just for the note, these two gentlemen just fresh back from Manchester because they are part of the Daniel Dubois' team. Daniel Dubois won his fight and they were part of the camp. So congratulations to you. And the floor is yours. What is OPSys Group about? And talk to us a little bit about that.
Thank you, Seb, and hi, everyone. So the OPSys Group is, Tom and I both have an extensive background in elite sport, particularly the Premier League, but across lots of different sports. Our mission at the OPSys Group, we are a performance tech platform, and we want to take the elite sport methodology right from the top across the whole game to make sure that performance is pushed in a safe manner, but in a uniform manner as well. And backing on the particular themes this morning about asset management is to make sure that owners and C-suite board members are aligned as well in protecting their assets, not only week to week, but for the duration of their contracts.
Yeah, I think obviously we come at it from the on-pitch side. It's great to be sitting here with Seb, who I've known for a very long time. We've worked either side of that white line. Seb's been on the pitch, we've been off the pitch. Ultimately, you know, we're all here to talk about football, and football boils down to what happens on the pitch itself. And what we do is to have to work to keep the best players, all players on the pitch for as long as possible, which the fans love. It's good for the overall product, but also good for the players themselves. So that's very much what we're about, where we come from, and the space that we work in.
So we're talking about performance, and I remember when I was playing, for those of you that know, I used to be a football player, professional football player, retired a couple of years ago, and we always talked about performance. But performance, there was about the conversation about how quick can you go, how many games can you play. But I think the modern football player, now things have changed. And I wanted to bring Dr. Ravi and Tom to talk about their side, their view about the performance. For you guys, it's an open conversation, and I think we're going to be able to bounce back ideas. You've known my era, for example, when I was playing, and what the players you're dealing with right now. What do you think, how the modern player has evolved in terms of performance? What is performance means to you, first and foremost?
Yeah, it's a fantastic word, isn't it? It's something that we talk about a lot. I think we talk about it in the football sense from, you know, game to game, season to season. I spent 10 years in the Premier League. I left just under 2 years ago, and I think the game has changed so much, even in the Premier League within that time. I think the physical demands for players now in terms of how many games they're playing. When I started, it was probably, you know, Seb, you'll echo this as well. It was probably a 10 and a half month season, really, 10 and a half month at the highest level, approaching 11. It crept to an 11-month season. Now it's a 12-month season. You know, we're in a World Cup year this year. Fantastic, incredible thing to be able to watch. But you know, the schedule for the players is relentless. It's a relentless schedule. So we talk about performance and longevity of performance. Obviously, longevity means across a career, and we all strive in terms of what we do in terms of our field to be able to have players playing for as long as possible, which is obviously something that they very much want as well. But also longevity across a season. Injuries is something that everyone strives to work against, but unfortunately are a part and parcel of the game. So I think where the game has changed is being able to allow to use the technology that has evolved with the human interaction to be able to enable players to you know, play for their highest level across that 12-month season to the utmost of their ability.
Dr. Ravi, we talk about 12-month period. What concerns you the most about what has been asked to the player? What is your concern about that?
Yeah, I think the demands are now relentless. Just back onto Tom's point, I think what is performance to me? Performance is we see it day in day out in the Premier League is to be able to develop a system and a backbone that can withstand the most severest of pressure and still function within that. Speaking to lots of different people in my types of roles across all different types of elite sports, and I think every environment has an element of chaos in it. I'll be lying if I said otherwise. And I think the best organizations and teams and players can navigate through that the best, because there's just so many different directions everyone's pulled in. Ultimately, we want to win on the pitch. The players are the ultimate assets, and the winning just definitely helps propel the business, though it does go hand in hand. To answer your other question, Seb, I think what I've seen, particularly this season, is not the number, but it's probably more the severity of the injuries. And that is all part and parcel of what Tom's mentioned about the unrelenting schedule. But it's what used to be players getting injured, being out for 2 or 3 weeks with muscular injuries, are now presenting with probably the severest form of that injury, being out for 3 or 4 months. That is certainly a trend I've seen this year.
Do you guys think that players are better athletes, or they are being pushed harder?
It's a fantastic question, isn't it? And that could be something that could spend a lot of time talking about. I think regardless of era, I think regardless of time, I think players have always been incredibly skillful and also resilient in many different ways to be able to, the percentage of being able to make it to the highest level of football is, we all know, minuscule. To be able to get to that level at any period of time is incredible, really. I think now, in terms of what's happening, I think the intensity of the game is much higher, and we can see that in terms of when you see how, the metrics around the data that's collected in terms of the number of games. So I think players are playing the game in a different way. I think the game is different. I think also how, especially in the Premier League, the way the game is being played is different, which also lends itself. Having worked with many different managers and coaches, obviously you work for Jose Mourinho to prepare a centre-back. It's very different to working with Maurizio Pochettino, and that's exactly the same as for a player being able to then go out and perform on the pitch. The cycle of managers becomes shorter. When a player, we all know when managers and coaches changes, injury rates go up, and that's for a number of different reasons, and that all comes into that whole overall concept of how that affects the players themselves.
I think players have to be fitted, whether they learn the hard way or the easy way. If they get injured or hurt, having to adapt to new training methods, they realise they have to change their lifestyle, be spot on with their nutrition, being strong in the gym, and being available for training and games. Otherwise, they won't get selected. So I think it's whichever way they want to learn. But the way that modern football is now, with the schedule and the speed, the strength of all the opposition, you have no choice but to look after yourself to the best.
But I remember my time. We've always been told to look after ourselves, and I think it's all relevant to the era you're playing in. But my question for you is, what do you actually think? What separates a player that can sustain a career, an elite performance career for 10, 15 years than another? Because right now, I see some players, and when I look at them and I talk to them, they're not necessarily so different than the way we were thinking back in the day. But realistically, data shows that they need way more. So what separates the two players?
I think that, the era of kind of that hyper individualized management of players is here. I think players at the highest level that we see are obviously having their own teams of people around them, so it doesn't stop at the training ground. That era of kind of coming in at 9 o'clock, leaving at 1 o'clock, and then going off and playing golf in the afternoon for 6 hours is becoming less and less. And I think you can see Cristiano Ronaldo, is very well publicised, the amount that he invests in terms of his own care and his own team around him, and that's becoming more and more prevalent across the game. And I think that's where players are seeing they're able to provide that edge for themselves, where within a club you have 30 players, 25 players. It's very, very difficult to have that level of individualization. Even though clubs and teams and medical teams and performance teams strive to achieve that, it is very, very hard. I think where players are moving to now is that they are viewing themselves, like Ravi said, as their own assets and need to look after themselves in that way. And I know that happened in your era, and again, we've spoken about this, but not to the same level that it's happening now in terms of that kind of wraparound care and players treating themselves in that way.
You need that, you know as well, Seb, you need that leadership within the coaching staff and the performance team, but also within the players. If you've got 2 or 3 of the senior players driving those standards about, guys, come on, let's get in the gym earlier than we're expected, or are we doing this, or no, we're not doing that, that helps drive things as well. So I think that leadership from all corners of the club is very important.
You mentioned Cristiano Ronaldo, for example, and Doctor. My question is for you. Do you think that players understand their body now better than in the previous generation? Do they have more knowledge about what the body requires, the body feels like, than the previous generation?
Yeah, I think that comes hand in hand with better understanding in performance medicine. You know, we have a plethora of like specialist sports nutritionists that help the players, and like Tom said, they all can now afford their own mini teams as well. So I think if they're open to the education, they do better understand it, but they are fortunate to have the resources available to them that maybe players of 10, 15 years ago didn't. So I think it's very contextual.
And yeah, I think, you know, AI has changed everything, hasn't it? It's made everyone more informed across many, many different subjects, and you see that in what we do as well. I think it's a positive. You know, if a player, as any individual, wants to challenge a decision or a management plan, or, you know, fantastic to have the more information, because it holds people to account and it makes you clinically reason and make your decision even more a robust one, because you can look that player in the eye. You know, as we've spoken about today, you know, human interaction is so important within this AI world, and a player wants to look at the person standing in front of them, look them in the eye and tell them that that's the best decision for them, and then they will trust it and go with it. And I think that's really important. So I think it is a positive to have that more information.
You know it as much as I do. Football is a special environment. We players, we require something different, and sometimes we like the honesty. You worked into the boxing world, which is, for me, elite performance as well, but it requires something different. What have you learned about the boxing environment that could be applied into football and vice versa?
Look, they say you don't play boxing, right? You know, it's a very different kind of culture around the idea of fighting someone and walking into a ring, and very gladiatorial, you're 1 versus 1, which adds a whole different element in any sport, which is 1 versus 1. I think the thing about football has been the culture of how, especially what we do in the performance world, in the medicine kind of space as well, is quite structured. I think, you know, it's quite well kind of established across football around what that means and the requirements around that across many different cultures, many different nationalities. In boxing, it's not like that at all. It is kind of very different in terms of what different people have to help themselves in that. But again, high performance and elite sport is elite sport. Elite sport is chaotic across every different environment. I think football's probably a little bit more kind of structured in its day-to-day. Boxing is slightly different, but at the end of the day, to be an elite athlete, you have to have something different wired within your brain, within your conscience, to be able to go out and compete to the highest level, and that's regardless of the sport that you're in. So it's a great learning experience to then take that back to football, because I think that individualization and that competitive edge is something that I have learned to improve my practice when working in the football environment as well. So yeah, it's very much you can take from all sports to kind of improve that knowledge.
No, Tom's spot on. I think what we found when we first went into the boxing industry a couple of years ago was that the amount of resources is vastly different. So what's the common denominator? Because we've still got a fighter who's an elite performer himself with the highest pressure and has to win, and so do our footballers. So I think it boils down to doing the brilliant basics, and that can be lost in football with so many staff and players and competing interests, that people focus on the tiny edge you can bring to performance. But actually, a lot of time what's lost in translation are the basics, and they're not done well. And what we found was logistically a lot easier working with Daniel, was that we were able to really hone in on that with far less resources available to us and still achieve the outcomes. But that's testament to him as the athlete as well, and you need that buy-in from any athlete.
In any side of the performance, there's the pressure, the self-awareness, the mental pressure. What's your take on it, and do you think that the pressure that the actual player are going through is handled properly from their side and from the, I would say, the club side?
Again, I think there's no uniform answer on that. I think each player will treat it slightly differently. Some will have people that they work with outside. Some don't trust the voice that comes through the club. I think you'll know this as much as I do. And when you work on the club side, that can be frustrating. But I think you can understand why. They want to have their own person that they can confide in and be able to have that relationship with them, to be able to form the trust to get what they need. When they step on the pitch, when they step in the ring, at the end of the day, it's them that's doing it. I know how to prepare a player to play in the Premier League. I can't do it myself, but I can help them get to that position. But once they step over the white line, once they're on the grass, especially after a long-term injury, it's they're on their own effectively. So they need to have that support network and feel like they are prepared and be supported in their preparation to be able to go and perform in the way that they need to.
And just to expand on that, I think it boils down to trust, and particularly with any athlete, until they really know that you deep down care about them, they won't confide in you, or you can't really put your own practices into place. In all honesty, that is a challenge, Seb, still, even in the Premier League, about bringing in specialised external help to help with the mental health side of things. That can boil down to a lack of trust from all key people, players, but also the coaches. The coaches themselves see themselves as they want to be the voice. They don't want an external voice coming in talking to the players. So often it will be down to anecdotal chats with performance staff where the players feel safe, or their own family members.
But you say the words players feel safe, and for those of you who haven't been in a dressing room, I think the main thing is safety. Is feeling safe, because the players being approached by everyone, all type of person. But in order for a player to perform, and I've always been wondering why the clubs, because some of the club member, they've never been in their position, so they might not know exactly what they need. And when you talk about having your own physio, for example, obviously, there's a conflict, but there's this element of trust, and he's not going to talk to the club, he's not going to talk to the manager, so whatever you're telling to the player, to the physio, is going to stay between you and the physio. And the physio room, for example, in the football club, is the safest place that in the whole training ground. So within your performance, we place so many emphasis and trust into you. It's like going to the therapist, and you know how to handle our emotion and what we're doing. So nowadays, how do you deal with this new generation that has maybe different type of issues, but at the end of the day, still want to perform?
Yeah, I think it's, again, I know every individual is different, and I think that the skill when you work within a team sport, when you're within a large group, is still being able to identify that individual and what motivates them, and what you can use to get what you need them to do to get the best for themselves. Again, injury is a devastating thing. We always say when a player gets injured, you allow them the mourning period, you allow them that period of feeling sad, upset, angry, etc. And obviously that will depend on the length of the injury, the type of the injury, but you have to take them to a point where you go, right, come on, now every day we're going to work towards that end goal. We worked with the coach as part of a staff that came in, and he used to say every day, one day less. He walked into the treatment room, one day less, he used to say to players. And actually that concept of chunking little days, little gains, trying to find that little win for the player, keep that competitive edge, because players are competitive beasts. They want to win. So how can you get a player, right, we've got 9 months of this, how do we make it as interactive as possible? And I think at the end of the day, players haven't changed in that aspect. It is still the safe zone. Players are still young men who want to have fun, win, and compete. So you just have to try and find that individual element to unlock to help them get to where you need to get them, regardless of the environment.
And unfortunately, working in elite sport and pushing that red line every day, and there's lots of grey areas, but when players get injured, that is when they are at their most vulnerable and when they get even closer to you. And when, like Tom said, they're upset, they're confused, they're getting messages from all different people. They do rely on the key figures of the performance team to be calm, to be straight, to almost tell them this is what is going to happen. And it just calms everything down. And in fact, it's a great bonding experience and very powerful that the players and his wider team really appreciate.
I think also, we want the players to be, or any athlete to be competing. That's ultimately our job, is to have them on the pitch. In football, our job is to keep players on the pitch, get them back on the pitch as soon as possible. Players need to feel like they're getting pushed in the right way, in a way that they feel supported and safe and supported, but know that you're doing that. I think there can be sometimes a little bit of hesitancy around that in elite sport. I think some people and players don't want to feel like they're being held back. You can't let a player or a manager or a coach or a club feel like players are being held back. So you have to find that balance of pushing them in the right way, that they feel like they're being pushed towards their target.
Yeah, that's what we need. I said we, even though I'm not playing no more. But you're talking about monitoring data, because we're getting into a world of data. We are into a world of data, and data is part of our life. Tom, what metrics do you think are being overvaluing by clubs?
I think data now in sports and performance is more than it's ever been, it's brilliant. It's helped us push on the game. We're able to monitor in a way like we've never been able to monitor. We've been able to, ensure players are back to levels of fitness, strength, performance that we've never had. But you have to be careful. You have to not forget about the individual within that data and what that means within the story of where they are. So I think the overvaluing can be that people can over-rely on the data a little bit in terms of what we do, and I think you need to use it with context and also understand where that data is coming from. What algorithm is driving this variable that's being presented to me as a practitioner to make that decision to go, okay, this player's ready to perform, this player's not ready to perform, what do we need to be aware of? I think the biggest thing, and where it's moving to and where we're seeing and what we do as well, is how you bring all those data variables together and actually have something that's a reliable outcome that can be used to help improve performance. I think that's where the kind of next stage of data is moving to.
Is something that you took in consideration in OPSys Group, for example?
Yeah, so I think on Tom's point, I think the challenge is that there's plenty of data, but the information coming out from the data can be very fragmented and not bespoke to individual players. If you play, being a left back is very different to being a central midfielder. So the data needs to be more bespoke, and that can be a challenge because there's lots of players to deal with and not as many staff, and that's certainly the direction that elite football is going to and needs to go to, because that's what the players need.
How do you balance sports science and listening to the players? Because when we get injured, for example, we go for a scan, an MRI scan. Do we treat the scan or we treat the player's symptom? We always say, don't treat the scan, treat the player's symptom. But nowadays with sports science, my question is, how do you and you two, and how does football balance between listening to the player and following the sports science data?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think certainly if we're going to prioritize, you always listen to the player. I think it comes with experience of knowing when to intervene with all the modalities that are available to you. In the Premier League, we do not jump to a scan. It can create more noise. And I know some clubs will want to know timelines or the severity of the injury, but we can tell straight away from a good clinical assessment. So you always have to treat the player who is central to all of it, because they'll be, at the time of, if something goes wrong, they're upset. And the last thing we want to do is to unnecessarily do any extra investigations that we don't need to at the time. Everything done at the right moment for a reason, and the players will question, rightfully so, why are we doing this? Why not this? Or I've had players recently say, why don't we just scan me straight away? And when you explain the rationale and you're honest and you say, you calm things down, they understand, they trust the process. But of course, the athlete will always be the center of it.
We always say, treat the man or the woman, not the scan, right? You have to use their clinical judgment and your experience to provide context to what's going on. And, like Ravi said, and we've spoken about, not forgetting the human sitting in front of you and the context of where they are. A player in the last few months of their contract will be thinking about things in a certain way, and you have to balance out, career longevity in terms of their overall physical health and their short-term needs. And then you have to find that decision that they are happy with, because ultimately we work in a world of informed consent as well, right? The player is in charge of their own body at the end of the day, and you provide that clinical judgment and expertise to help with that. But they have to be happy, because if you're not collectively happy, something's not going to go in a way that's going to be successful, which is the ultimate outcome that we all want.
You mentioned the word longevity. I've heard about this holistic management way to be. What does it mean?
I think longevity in a football context and the management that goes around that, for me, is around how you can keep a player playing for as long as possible. Again, using Cristiano as an example, for someone who's into his 40s, still playing at a very, very good level, he's managed to achieve that. I think there are things now that, probably medical interventions that happened many years ago wouldn't happen in the same way that they do through the learnings of things that are happening in the past. I think there's additional things that come in now in terms of interventions into kind of health and performance that can assist. But ultimately, longevity is around, again, the individual thinking about the things that can be addressed, the modifiable factors that you can assist in helping someone be the best version of themselves, which we all try and strive for in our own lives as well as in football. So I think that's kind of the meaning for me for career longevity and performance longevity is that.
Do you think there's an element of genetics? Because to be fair, Cristiano Ronaldo is a year older than me, but I feel like 75. I can barely move, and I think I haven't done everything I could in terms of looking after my body. But I think sometimes I've been a bit unlucky. For example, I got a hip issue. But my mom had it. It's like my mom had it, my grandma had it. So when I started to play football, I was already started with an handicap. But my resilience made me go through and achieve a certain level. But I don't think that I could have played until 40 or even 38. So what's your take on it, Doc?
Yeah, I think certainly genetics plays a part, and as always in a player's career, there's sliding doors moments of if severe injuries happen to them. But definitely Tom's correct in now players see themselves as assets and want to play into their late 30s, early 40s, because they can continue to win big contracts, which is a win-win for the clubs as well, because they're getting players who are just getting better with experience, can still have the physical outputs they need. So it's a worthwhile investment for them. And we see it now, like particularly in the off-season, we'll do interventions to players not for the short term, so they're back ready for July, August, but actually for their long-term health, for them not to be getting early arthritis in their knees when they hit their mid-30s, 40s. So we're always having to think with two hats on, their immediate performance and the longevity of their career, but also after their career. We don't want these players to be in chronic pain after they finish playing, which is really important. I wish I worked with you earlier. So we always have different hats on, and the players certainly see themselves differently from an asset perspective. So I think gone are the days where a player will be forced to play a match they don't feel they're ready for. They will certainly push back, and particularly now we're seeing it with the lens of the World Cup starting in a month's time. That's our players who are going to the World Cup, you can see it's in their minds of what they are willing to and not willing to push through to make sure that they're fit for June for the World Cup.
This asset perspective, because players got to realize they are assets and they got to look after themselves. And you, from the medical perspective, the performance perspective, what kind of conversation do you have with the players in terms of that? Is it head-on conversation, or is it still something that people don't really want to talk about? We all know about it, but we know that the player is thinking about his performance. You said that there's the World Cup coming up. I remember when I was about to get into the World Cup, or about to get into the Euros or African Cup of Nations for myself, there's still an element of, okay, I got value, I can't really, where do I push? And this is where you guys come to play.
Yeah, I think when you work externally from a club, I've been on both sides of it. I worked within the club environment for a very long time. Now I work externally, and I think you can have different conversations with players. But I think ultimately for players, it's about, going into a World Cup, you want to be in the best position as well, right? You don't want to. We've all seen it. We've all seen the players that suddenly have a problem that means they miss the final couple of weeks in the season and then suddenly are available for the World Cup, and I completely understand it, because they don't come around, and we all know the tragic circumstances where players miss, but you need to be at a level where you can perform as well, right? You don't want to miss extensive amounts of football. You want to be sharp, you want to be fit, and you want to be ready to go. So I think when you're external, it's about having those conversations and being able to be honest with them, and actually them know that you're coming at it from their own perspective as well. And I think when you do work externally, it's the protecting the players again from. Players can be vulnerable as well. I know we don't think about that so much, but I think they can be vulnerable to people telling them things, getting them to do things in terms of their health and their performance, which might not match with either their short-term or long-term kind of aspirations. So it is kind of sitting within that and being able to have those conversations. But again, coming back to trust. If they can trust what you say, then they'll be able to lead them to the best outcome.
What are the biggest mistake that players are still doing in terms of recovery? Because at the end of the day, we got to recover. It's a high-intensity game. It goes faster and faster. But what are those mistakes that they still do that you can? And sometimes you scratch your head, you think like, you shouldn't be doing that.
Mistakes is quite an unfair word. A lot of these guys have their own recovery modalities at home, which they can do, so you have to trust them. So I think a big thing is to have mutual trust. You treat the players like adults, not like children. So to give them the freedom to know they know their bodies, what they should and shouldn't be doing. They know how to behave when a match is coming out, about to take place. But also then recognizing as a wider team, when you have a break in the schedule, knowing how to refresh the players, so that trust is mutual. So I wouldn't say we see big mistakes from the players, because I think for all the monitoring and performance output metrics, we can see if there are drop-offs that don't quite tally up, indicating that something else is going on. But it comes back to trust, and if there are issues off the pitch, the players do confide in us quite often that things are going on, and we try to help address.
I think that the only recovery that's bad recovery is no recovery. I think that the information and knowledge around recovery and whatever that means is so much better now than it ever was. And I think it is very individual. Like Ravi said, I think, I remember working many years ago, and there was a strict routine that everyone had to follow, and people didn't want to do that because some people don't like being in the ice bath for 20 minutes. I think you have to allow players to have that free reign and be able to do that individually, to be ready. Ultimately, when it comes to it, like I said, they're the ones stepping on the pitch. They need to feel like they have prepared in the way that they feel best for them to be ready. So when you're within a team, you need to try and create an environment that fosters that, to be able to allow them to do that, to then express themselves.
Nowadays, we talk a lot about mental health in the performance of a player. Do you think, or have you witnessed an increase of awareness in terms of working, for me, which is the most important muscle in your body, which is your brain? So how has it evolved since the day you were in the club and now you're working externally in terms of elite performance?
Yeah, again, I think it's something that people are more, and players are more aware of. Some will invest more time into it than others, definitely, and some will do it in traditional senses, say working with someone. Some will do it in less traditional senses, in terms of, finding ways of relaxing in different ways, in terms of music or, whatever that may be. So I do think there's more knowledge. But again, I think it comes back to to what they can engage with and what they believe in and the people that they speak to. And I know the work that you do, Seb, where someone that they can look at and look in the eye and say, actually, you know what I'm going through is helpful as well, but not also the only way of doing it. But I think different individuals will want that and some won't want that. So I think it is a very individual case.
Yeah, I think what I've seen certainly is if there's pushback from the club to have someone employed from them, then actually players will come to me to help seek out individuals to work bespokely, and often that can be somebody who's just from the same culture, same mother tongue as them, and that person can give. Again, it comes back to more a bespoke, individualized approach. I know some clinical psychologists that come to our games to specifically watch their client and then feed back to them. That's what they want, and of course they then have their relationship of confidentiality, but whatever is allowed to be shared and is agreed between those two will get fed back to me, which is powerful.
Quick fire question for you two. What trend will shape football performance globally?
I think it is that the individualization and people becoming more aware of their own asset and their own performance. I think that's where it's shifting to. I think there's the big players across the kind of major leagues are doing that already. I think that's starting to trickle down now into the kind of they have to have the level of investment that's required to do that in the right way. But I do think that is where it's shifting to within the higher space, and also being able to have the right people around them to be able to then give them the right input, and for clubs to likewise be able to manage that is where it's going to go to.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we will over the next 5 years move into this hyper individualization model. The tricky part is then players building the right personnel around them. To have the right expertise, because there's a lot at stake. So, but I think just the way that the players are evolving, the demands, like I said, they see themselves as assets playing into their 40s. They need that bespoke management for them pretty much 24/7, and then that then can be liaised with the medical teams of the clubs.
What area of sports medicine excites you the most?
Putting us on the spot.
Yeah, that's what I'm here for.
Again, I think it is probably everything that we've spoken about already. I think it is using AI, using data to be able to inform practice. I think that's the exciting thing about where AI can take and help, and what it's already doing. And obviously it's taken us all a bit of time to kind of embrace that. But I think it's where it can push things to be even better in the world that we work in that sports performance and sports medicine world, and to hopefully be able to reduce risk of injury, keep players on the pitch for longer, and then be able to get them back as soon as possible as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Seb. I think we're moving from sports medicine to performance medicine, and a key thing is a daily struggle is it's impossible to prove to a manager or a player that if we do X, Y, Z, we have prevented a problem, prevented an injury. It's impossible, to know. You can only really know retrospectively. So I think the exciting trend about the data, the AI, the bespoke nature of where it's heading is to be able to then give that bespoke input to the athlete to say this is what needs to be addressed, otherwise we are in danger of picking up injuries or severe injuries like we're seeing this season. So then that feedback loop can be closed, and then then the players can continue to have very long and fruitful careers. So that's the exciting thing. I think the trend is to be able to prove to key stakeholders throughout football is that doing X, Y, Z in recovery or performance or load management, which is always a big topic, is to be able to prove that if we do this, we will prevent injuries happening.
Thank you very much, guys. And just to close us off, I think performance, for having been there, working in it now on the other side, we've always looked at it from a physical perspective. When you talk about performance, people only think about physical activity, but mentally for me is as important as the physical aspect. You two are dealing with it ever so well. You've been there, you understand us, or even for the next couple of generation of players. But if there's one thing people got to realize and remember is it's not the player that makes the man. I always say it's the man that makes the player. in order for any player to perform, you need to understand the man behind it. Then the player comes after. If you can deal with the man within his authentic self, I think, and that's why I click with you and I've really connected with you too, you're going to be able to have a better player. So thank you very much for having us, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.